Argoz had always been drawn to the light. In the dark crevices of the goblin warrens where she was born, her earliest memories were of crawling towards glints of treasure, the flash of metal, the glimmer of a stolen gem, even the way a smooth stone caught the firelight. She was unlike the others, the goblins who scoffed at anything that didn't serve an immediate purpose. They didn't understand the beauty of a polished coin, the thrill of a jeweled dagger. For Argoz, each piece held a story, each trinket was a prize. She started small, filching bits of treasure from careless merchants, growing bolder with each success. Her obsession with shiny things became a hunger, a need that pulsed beneath her skin. She wasn't after riches for power or respect, she craved them for their beauty and their shimmer. Over the years, her skills in theft and escape became refined, polished through countless encounters and narrow escapes. She was swift, quiet, and relentless. Now, Argoz had a reputation not just as a thief but as a force to be reckoned with. Mirkdusk was her playground, a sprawling, rugged landscape where the shadows fell early and danger lurked in every corner. The terrain was harsh, jagged cliffs and deep forests, towns built on precipices, and abandoned mines filled with treasures left by miners too afraid to return. From the mountain peaks of Shadowspire to the low-lying swamps of Feymarsh, Mirkdusk was a place where the strong survived and the clever thrived. It was a land of rival factions and dangerous alliances. The most powerful of them was Lord Draven, a ruthless noble who hoarded artifacts and had amassed enough wealth to decorate his entire fortress in rare jewels and gold. Draven was more than a lord. He was a tyrant who brokered in secrets and traded in lives. His subjects hated him, but he was powerful enough to crush any rebellion. For Argoz, Draven's fortress was more than a challenge, it was an invitation. His treasures were whispered about in every corner of Mirkdusk, and she had been listening. She knew of the celestial gem, the prized jewel of his collection, which was said to glow with the light of the stars. Rumour had it that Draven's fortress was protected by more than just walls and guards. It was said he had bound dark magic to the land itself, and only the bravest or most foolish would attempt a theft. Argoz, of course, fit both descriptions. Argoz was more than just a thief. She was a collector, an artist of sorts, though she wouldn't have used that word. Her hideout, a secret lair in the cliffs near Tanglewood Hollow, was decorated with her pretties, as she called them. The walls were lined with chains of pearls, discarded rings, polished stones, and pieces of mirror. She had a way of categorizing them, sometimes by colour, sometimes by size, but always by the strange sense of wonder each item brought her. Whenever she acquired a new piece, she would spend hours examining it, running her fingers along its surface, admiring the way the light bounced off it. She had her favourites, of course, a ruby bracelet stolen from a noble's wife, a silver coin etched with a forgotten language, a delicate gold chain that glimmered even in the dark. But it was her lucky coin that she valued most. It was a simple copper piece, unremarkable to anyone else, but to Argoz, it was the first piece she'd ever stolen. The first time she had felt the thrill of the chase, the rush of success. She kept it close, rubbing it between her fingers whenever she needed to think or plan her next heist. Argoz wasn't one for friends, but she did have acquaintances, people who shared her appreciation for treasure, albeit in their own twisted ways. One of these was Ezran the Trickster, a half-elf with a quick smile and a talent for illusions. They had met in the town of Fogroot after a botched heist, where they both found themselves on the wrong side of a tavern brawl. Argoz, always quick with her wits and quicker with her blade, had fought her way out, and Ezran, amused and impressed, had followed. Ezran was as greedy as she was, though his love for treasure was more strategic. To him, riches meant power. To her, they meant beauty and thrill. Their differences made them complementary, if not exactly trustworthy allies. Ezran knew of the celestial gem and had warned her against it, but Argoz was undeterred. To her, the gem represented everything she loved in one exquisite glittering package. It was her destiny to steal it. With Ezran's reluctant assistance, Argoz began crafting her plan. Draven's fortress was a nightmare for most thieves. Guards patrolled every hour, magical wards protected the walls, and even the windows were fitted with cursed glass that could cut through flesh as easily as silk. Argoz loved it. Every obstacle was a test of her skills, a puzzle waiting to be solved. She pored over maps of the fortress, memorizing every entrance and every guard rotation, until she knew the place better than Draven's own men. Ezran's illusions would cover her escape, but the entry would be all her own. She would scale the western wall, slip through the guard tower, and disable the wards on the eastern courtyard. From there, it was a short dash to the treasure chamber, where the celestial gem waited. But Argoz knew better than to think everything would go according to plan. She was a realist, after all. The thrill was in the unpredictability, the unexpected twist, the near miss, the split-second decisions that separated the truly great thieves from the amateurs. And Argoz was no amateur. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting Mirkdusk into shadow as Argoz prepared herself. Tonight was the night. The crisp air sharpened her senses as she adjusted the straps of her leather armor, hidden beneath a loose, dark cloak. She reached into her pouch and drew out her lucky coin, rubbing it between her fingers as she studied the looming silhouette of Duskfall Fortress in the distance. Duskfall wasn't just any fortress, it was a monument to wealth and arrogance, a dark stone behemoth that seemed to claw at the sky. Fires glowed in its towers, casting an eerie orange light against the fortress walls. She could see the flickering forms of guards patrolling the battlements, their shadows long and foreboding. Ezran had warned her not to underestimate Lord Draven, but Argoz's heart beat with a familiar excitement. This was why she lived. To face the impossible, to outwit the powerful, and to claim the beauty they tried so hard to keep from her. Her plan was simple in theory, but devilishly complex in practice. She would scale the outer wall, avoid the guards, and enter through a narrow window near the armory. Once inside, she would make her way to the vault where the celestial gem awaited, glowing with the light of 1,000 stars. Or so the stories said. As she moved through the shadows, Argoz felt alive. Her senses were heightened, her mind sharp. Every sound, every flicker of movement was registered, catalogued, and assessed. Her small stature allowed her to slip through spaces where others would struggle. Every step was calculated, every move purposeful. She was a predator in the night, and Duskfall was her hunting ground. Scaling the fortress wall was easy for someone like her. She'd grown up clambering over rocky cliffs and squeezing into tight spaces in the goblin warrens. Her fingers found purchase in the stone, and she pulled herself up with the agility of a spider. Halfway up, she paused, pressing herself flat against the cold stone as a guard passed above her, his torch casting a glow that barely missed her. When the guard moved on, she continued her ascent, slipping through the narrow window and landing silently inside the armory. Rows of weapons gleamed in the dim light, swords, spears, and shields adorned with precious metals. For a moment, Argoz's fingers itched with the urge to touch, to feel the cold steel and the gleam of polished silver. But tonight, there was only one prize that mattered. The fortress was eerily silent, the only sounds the distant crackling of torches and the occasional murmuring of guards as they passed on their patrols. Argoz moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows and listening for any sign of trouble. The halls were filled with tapestries and statues, tributes to Lord Draven's conquests and victories. Every corner was designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of his power. As she approached the main hall, she felt the subtle tingle of magic, a protective ward. Ezran had warned her about these. The wards weren't visible to the eye, but to someone with Argos's sensitivity, they felt like a gentle pressure against her skin. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small vial of ground nightshade, sprinkling it across the floor. The dust revealed a faint, shimmering barrier across the hallway. "Nice try, Draven," she whispered, with a smirk. With careful movements, Argoz slipped through the gaps in the ward, her breath steady as she focused. One wrong move, and the entire fortress would be alerted. But she was no ordinary thief. She was an artist, and this was her masterpiece. At last, she reached the door to the vault. The lock was intricate, a work of art in itself, with interlocking gears and hidden mechanisms designed to keep out even the most determined thief. But to Argos, it was a challenge she relished. She pulled out her lockpicks, fingers deftly working through the mechanisms, her ears attuned to every click and shift within the lock. Minutes passed, each one filled with a tension that she savoured. Finally, there was a soft, satisfying click, and the door creaked open. Inside, the vault was dark, save for a single pedestal at its centre, illuminated by a faint, ethereal glow. There it was, the celestial gem. It was even more beautiful than she had imagined, a perfect sphere that glowed with a soft, silvery light. As she approached, the gem seemed to pulse in response, as if sensing her presence. She reached out, her fingers trembling with anticipation, and lifted it from its stand. In that moment, she felt a surge of joy so intense it was almost painful. She had done it. The celestial gem was hers, but her triumph was short-lived. As soon as the gem left the pedestal, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the vault, a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. The air grew thick with the sensation of magic, dark and oppressive. Argos's heart raced as she looked around, realizing that the vault was sealing itself shut. "Clever," she muttered under her breath, admiring Draven's precautions even as she cursed them. She turned and sprinted for the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it, locking her inside. The walls began to pulse with a dark energy, and she felt the familiar tingle of a powerful enchantment. Trapped, with no way out. But Argoz wasn't one to give up easily. She was resourceful after all. She pulled out a small vial from her pouch, an explosive concoction she'd purchased from an alchemist in Shadowspire. Normally she used it as a last resort, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She placed the vial against the door and struck it with the hilt of her dagger. The resulting explosion was muffled but effective, blowing the door off its hinges and sending a cloud of smoke billowing into the corridor. Without a moment's hesitation, she dashed through the haze, clutching the celestial gem tightly as she made her escape. Alarms began to blare, and the fortress was thrown into chaos. Guards shouted, their footsteps echoing down the halls as they searched for the intruder. Argos's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was what she lived for, the thrill of the chase, the rush of escape. She dodged and weaved through the fortress, evading guards and slipping through hidden passages. She could see the exit ahead, the night air beckoning her to freedom. But just as she reached the outer courtyard, a towering figure stepped into her path. Lord Draven was even more imposing than she had imagined. Clad in dark armour that glimmered faintly in the moonlight, he looked like a figure from a nightmare. A tall, muscular man with cold, calculating eyes and a face hardened by years of battle. He regarded her with a look of disdain, as if she were nothing more than an insect to be crushed. In his hand, he held a long, wickedly sharp sword, the blade etched with runes that pulsed with a dark energy. "You must be the little thief causing all this trouble," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Did you really think you could steal from me and walk away?" Argoz smirked, hiding the fear that gnawed at her. "What can I say? I have a weakness for pretty things." Draven's eyes narrowed, and he took a step forward, his sword raised. You should have stayed in the shadows, goblin. Now, you'll pay the price. The two stood in tense silence, facing each other in the moonlit courtyard. Argoz tightened her grip on the celestial gem, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. She knew she was outmatched, but she had one thing Draven didn't: a fierce, unrelenting spirit and a willingness to take risks that others would balk at. With a final smirk, she dashed to the side, narrowly avoiding his first strike as she made a desperate bid for freedom. The moon cast a cold light over the courtyard, illuminating the tense standoff between Argoz and Lord Draven. The fortress alarm blared, echoing against the stone walls, but both Argoz and Draven were focused solely on each other. Argoz's heart pounded as she calculated her options, clutching the celestial gem tightly against her chest. Draven moved with the confidence of a seasoned warrior, his heavy steps unhurried as he advanced. His sword gleamed, catching the moonlight and casting a faint glow that made the runes shimmer ominously. Argoz knew she couldn't match him in brute strength, but she had something he didn't: speed, agility, and the willingness to take risks. With a grin, she darted forward, feinting to the left, before sliding past him on the right, her dagger flashing out in a quick, precise slash. She felt her blade connect, slicing through the edge of his cloak, but Draven didn't even flinch. Instead, he swung his sword in a wide arc, forcing her to leap back, narrowly avoiding the deadly blade. "Is that all you've got, thief?" he taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "I expected more from the infamous goblin of Mirkdusk." Argoz laughed, keeping her stance low and ready. "You don't know me, Draven. I'm just getting started." They clashed in a blur of motion, Draven's heavy strikes crashing down like thunder, while Argoz danced around him, quick and elusive as a shadow. Each swing of his sword sent sparks flying as it struck the stone or scraped against her dagger. Argoz could feel the weight of his power, each strike a reminder that one misstep would mean her end. She moved with precision, every dodge and counterattack executed with the skill of someone who had spent a lifetime surviving on the edge. But Draven was relentless, his strikes unyielding. She couldn't hold him off forever. Then she spotted her opening, a narrow alley to the left, leading out of the courtyard and into the maze of the fortress's inner gardens. Without hesitation, she threw a handful of flash powder at Draven's feet. The powder exploded in a burst of blinding light, forcing him to shield his eyes. Using the distraction, Argoz turned and sprinted into the alley, her heart pounding with the thrill of escape. She could hear Draven's enraged roar behind her as he shook off the effects of the flash and gave chase. Argoz raced through the twisting paths of the fortress gardens, her footsteps light and quick. The gardens were a maze of high hedges and stone statues, an ornate labyrinth meant to intimidate visitors. But to Argoz, it was an opportunity, a place to hide, to confuse, and to outwit. She darted around corners, vaulting over hedges and slipping through narrow gaps in the foliage. Behind her, Draven's heavy footsteps thundered, his anger palpable in the night air. She could hear the clink of his armor, the growl of his frustration. Every turn she took, he seemed just a step behind, relentless in his pursuit. Argoz skidded to a stop as she reached a dead end, a high wall of stone blocking her path. She cursed under her breath, turning to face the way she had come. There was no time to climb the wall, not with Draven so close. As his figure appeared at the end of the path silhouetted by moonlight, she took a deep breath, clutching the celestial gem and readying herself for one last gamble. Draven advanced, a smug smile spreading across his face as he saw her trapped. "Nowhere left to run, little goblin. Surrender the gem, and I might spare your life." Argoz's eyes sparkled with defiance. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing. You should know better than to corner a goblin." With that, she threw the celestial gem into the air, sending it arcing over his head. Draven's gaze followed the gem, his instincts taking over as he reached out to grab it. In that split second, Argoz lunged forward, sweeping her leg low and knocking him off balance. As he stumbled, she leaped onto his back, using his own weight against him to throw him forward. He crashed into the wall, momentarily dazed, as the gem fell back into her waiting hand. She whispered in his ear, "You're not the only one who can play dirty." Before he could recover, Argoz sprinted past him, back down the path, her grin wide and heart pounding with adrenaline. She could hear more guards converging on her position, their shouts echoing through the night. Argoz didn't slow, her feet flying over the stone paths as she made her way toward the outer walls. She knew she couldn't outrun Draven and his men forever, not in his own fortress. But she had one last trick up her sleeve. Reaching a secluded corner near the western wall, she pulled a small grappling hook from her belt and swung it over the battlements. The hook caught, and she began climbing, her fingers digging into the rough stone as she scaled the wall. Just as she reached the top, she felt a surge of dread. Draven had caught up. He stood below, his face twisted in fury, his sword drawn as he glared up at her. "Run all you want, Argoz," he shouted. "I'll hunt you to the ends of the realms." Argoz looked down, a defiant smirk on her face as she balanced on the wall's edge. "Good luck catching me." With a final wink, she leapt from the wall, disappearing into the shadows below, the celestial gems safely tucked away. The night swallowed her whole, leaving Lord Draven and his men staring into the darkness, their quarry gone. Argoz's escape was the talk of Mirkdusk within days. Whispers of the goblin who had outwitted Lord Draven spread through the realm, her legend growing with each retelling. Some said she had stolen his very soul. Others claimed she had vanished into thin air, leaving only a taunting laugh in her wake. But Argoz didn't care about the rumours. She was already far from duskfall, deep in the wilderness, examining the celestial gem under the light of a campfire. It sparkled like a captured star, its light dancing across her fingers. It was hers now, a prize worthy of the risks she'd taken. Yet, even as she admired her treasure, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. She had made a powerful enemy in Lord Draven, and she knew he wouldn't rest until he had his revenge. But that was a worry for another day. For now she was free, with the stars overhead and the celestial gem in her grasp. With a satisfied smile, she tucked the gem away and lay back, letting the warmth of the fire and the thrill of victory lull her into sleep, already dreaming of her next adventure. Argoz sits in her hidden lair, nestled in the cliffs near Tanglewood Hollow, carefully polishing a small silver locket she recently acquired. Her treasures surround her, reflecting the faint glow of her campfire. She's been in hiding for weeks, lying low after her encounter with Draven. She knows the bounty is out there, and she's aware of the whispers in Mirkdusk, but she believes herself to be safe here, in the secrecy of her hideout. Suddenly she hears the faint crunch of footsteps outside, unusual in a place this remote. Her heart races and she quickly extinguishes the fire, slipping into the shadows. From her hiding spot, she sees a group of bounty hunters, their torches casting an ominous light as they search the area. They're organized, methodical, and far too skilled to be wandering by accident. As they close in, Argoz realizes with horror that they've been led here. Draven has somehow tracked her to one of her most secure hideouts. She grabs her essentials, the celestial gem, her dagger, and a small pouch of supplies, and slips out just as the hunters close in, their torches illuminating her carefully hidden stashes. She watches from a safe distance as they ransack her lair, taking every last trinket and destroying her hiding place. Her treasured collection, her memories, her symbols of pride, all gone in a matter of moments. Anger burns within her, but she knows that staying to fight would mean certain capture. With little else but her few carried possessions, Argoz flees to another hideout, a small, dimly lit safe house in the back alleys of Fogroot, hidden beneath an old warehouse. She moves carefully, slipping through the shadows as she navigates the familiar pathways. Here she keeps a stash of food, a few tools, and, most importantly, a cache of coins. It's a temporary shelter, a backup she's rarely used, but it feels secure. For now. As she enters the safe house, however, she senses that something is wrong. The air is heavy, too quiet, and the scent of stale smoke lingers. Her heart sinks as she discovers the truth. The stash has been emptied. Draven's hunters have already been here, taking everything of value and setting traps in her refuge. She narrowly avoids a snare, realizing with a chill that she's being systematically targeted. With nowhere else to go, she has no choice but to flee into the heart of Fogroot, blending with the night and hoping to escape notice. Each loss is stripping her down, taking away her familiar comforts and forcing her into the open. Desperate and running out of options, Argoz heads to one of her last remaining hideouts in the swampy Feymarsh. This location is as hidden as it is uncomfortable, a narrow, damp cavern hidden deep within the twisted roots of an ancient tree. She only ever stays here when she has no other choice. But as she approaches, she hears voices. She hides and listens, her heart pounding, as she realizes that another group of bounty hunters has already taken over the hideout, turning it into their temporary base as they search for her in the surrounding area. They speak in hushed tones about Draven's rewards, mentioning her by name and discussing her escape routes. Argoz fights back the surge of anger and desperation. She knows she can't take them on directly, but she also knows that she can't keep running. Every refuge has been stripped from her, every stash discovered, every ally out of reach or potentially compromised. As night falls, Argoz retreats into the swamp, muddy, exhausted, and with nothing left but the few belongings she carries. Her pride is wounded, her resources depleted, and her every move seems to be one step ahead of Draven's forces. She feels like a caged animal with fewer and fewer places to hide. In a last desperate act, she considers turning to Ezran the Trickster for help, even though she's unsure if he's been bought off by Draven. She's alone, vulnerable, and almost out of options. Her mind drifts to the legends of other realms, places she's heard of only in whispers, and wonders if escape beyond Mirkdusk might be her only hope. This is Argoz, at her lowest point, on the edge of despair but still holding on to a sliver of her rebellious spirit. She's ready to risk everything, even her life, for a way out of Draven's reach. It's only then that she starts to consider the unthinkable, fleeing to a realm called Earth. By this point, Argoz is drained. Each loss, each betrayal, and each narrow escape has chipped away at her confidence, leaving her raw and vulnerable. She is battered, both physically and mentally, with mud-streaked clothes and barely enough provisions to sustain her through the night. Her last remaining possessions are her dagger, the celestial gem, and a small pouch of rations. Lord Draven's web is closing in around her. Every ally she once trusted is unreachable, either because they're on Draven's payroll or because they fear him too much to take her in. Argoz is beginning to realize that her only chance may lie beyond this realm, but for now she has one last hope. Ezran the Trickster, who may have just enough loyalty to provide a way out, or turn her in. Argoz decides to take a dangerous route through Tanglewood Hollow, a forest known for its twisting paths and ancient trees. It's easy to get lost here, which is why she's chosen it. She hopes it will buy her some time. But the forest is eerily quiet, with only the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. As she moves through the shadows, Argoz feels the hairs on the back of her neck prickling. She's learned to trust these instincts, honed over years of thievery and escape. Suddenly, a glint catches her eye, a metallic shimmer among the trees. She ducks behind a boulder just as an arrow whizzes past her, embedding itself in the bark where she had been standing. Her heart races as she realizes it's an ambush. A group of Draven's hunters has tracked her here, waiting in the darkness to take her down. She scrambles, dodging between trees and rocks, her mind racing for an escape plan. She manages to evade the first few arrows, using the darkness to her advantage, but she knows she can't keep this up for long. The hunters are relentless, closing in with every step. She's nearly out of options when she spots a narrow crevice in the rocks, a small hiding place that might buy her a few precious moments. Argoz squeezes into the crevice, barely breathing as the hunter's footsteps draw closer. She presses herself flat against the cold stone, clutching the celestial gem tightly, hoping that they won't notice her hiding spot. She hears their voices gruff and irritated as they search the area. "Where did she go?" one of them mutters, clearly frustrated. "Spread out," another commands. "Draven wants her alive. The reward is double if she's brought in breathing." Argoz grits her teeth, resisting the urge to scoff. Alive or dead, she knows Draven will make an example of her. Her mind races, considering her options. She could wait them out, but that would mean staying vulnerable for far too long. She could fight, but with her dwindling energy and supplies, it would be a gamble. As they move further away, she takes a risk. She slips out of the crevice, silent as a shadow, and darts deeper into the forest. It's a dangerous move, but she knows that staying still would only give them more time to corner her. She uses the trees for cover, her footsteps muffled by the mossy ground, until she's finally far enough away to catch her breath. Exhausted and knowing that she can't keep running, Argoz makes a desperate decision. She will go to Fogroot and seek out Ezran the Trickster. They share a complicated past, a mix of mutual respect and occasional betrayal. But she knows that if anyone can help her slip out of Mirkdusk, or hide long enough to come up with a new plan, it's him. Fogroot is a town filled with misfits and scoundrels, a place where loyalty is bought and secrets are currency. She knows that it's risky to enter such a populated area with a bounty on her head, but at this point, she's willing to risk it all. As she sneaks into Fogroot under the cover of darkness, her face hidden beneath her hood, she feels eyes on her everywhere. Every shadow, every stranger could be a threat. The reward Draven has placed on her head is tempting for anyone, and she's painfully aware that her presence here is dangerous. She finds her way to the Crooked Fang, a dingy tavern where Ezran is known to do business. Slipping inside, she scans the room for his familiar face, but instead of Ezran, she spots a familiar figure in a dark corner, a bounty hunter from Draven's forces. He hasn't seen her yet, but it's only a matter of time. Just as she's about to leave, a hand grabs her wrist, pulling her into the shadows. She gasps, ready to fight, but stops when she sees Ezran's face. He's grinning, his eyes twinkling with that usual mischievous glint. "Always in trouble, aren't we?" he whispers. "Trouble follows me, Ezran," she retorts, trying to keep her tone light despite her fear. They sit at a secluded table, away from prying eyes, and she explains her situation, telling him about Draven's relentless pursuit and her dwindling options. Ezran listens, nodding thoughtfully, but there's a strange look in his eyes that makes her uneasy. "Help me get out of Mirkdusk," she says, her voice barely a whisper. "You owe me." Ezran leans back, a sly smile playing on his lips. "I might be able to help," he says slowly, "but there's something you should know." Her heart sinks. "What is it?" He shrugs, feigning nonchalance. "Word on the street is that Draven's upped the bounty. He's offering a fortune for you, Argoz. Enough to buy loyalty from even the closest friends." A chill runs down her spine as she realizes what he's saying. She can see it in his eyes, the way his hand rests near the hidden dagger at his side. He's considering it. She's become a prize, even to those she once trusted. Before he can act, she grabs the nearest mug and hurls it at his face, creating enough of a distraction to bolt from the table. She doesn't look back as she dashes out of the tavern, knowing that Ezran has already alerted the bounty hunter inside. The bounty hunter spots her the moment she exits the tavern, and a chase ensues through the winding, narrow streets of Fogroot. Argoz weaves through the alleyways, using her knowledge of the town to her advantage. She hears shouts behind her, more hunters joining the pursuit. Her options are running out, and she knows that if they catch her, it's all over. With no safe houses left, nowhere to hide, and betrayal at every corner, Argoz is forced to flee toward the last place she thought she'd ever go, the Ruins of Eldermire. It's a haunted, treacherous place, but she knows it holds something the others fear, portals to other realms. With the hunters hot on her heels, Argoz reaches the edge of the Ruins of Eldermire. She can see the faint shimmer of a portal among the ancient stones, flickering with unstable energy. She hesitates only a moment, her heart pounding as she glances back at the approaching figures. Draven's hunters have cornered her, their faces alight with the promise of reward. Taking a deep breath, she leaps through the portal, vanishing into the unknown as the hunters reach the ruins, left staring in frustration at the empty space where she once stood.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.